So, you're going to war in ancient Greece. Well, the first thing you'll need to do is grab your armor, grab your weapons, and pack some snacks. Like this ancient Greek treat, Yttrion. So thank you to Vite Ramen for sponsoring this video as we go to war as Greek hoplites. This time on Tasting History. Today we are in ancient Greece, and we've just been called up to defend our polis, or city-state. And while there's a lot to do to get ready, one of the most important things is to make sure we have enough food for those long hours of marching up ahead. Now we'll talk about many of the foods that we might eat as a hoplite or citizen soldier, but the one that we're actually making today is a bit of a sweet treat. Something that could give us that quick burst of energy just before heading into battle. Or if Sophocles is any authority, and he absolutely is, this snack, Yttrion, is just the thing to nosh on when you feel a rumbly in your tumbly. But I, being hungry, gaze again toward the Yttria. This food is mentioned in many ancient works spanning over 1,000 years, and they could vary in how they were made and the ingredients involved, but the most basic form, which is likely the form that you'd have if you were marching with an ancient Greek army, is, as Athenaeus says, a delicate cake made of sesame and honey. And that's it. Not really a recipe, and you could make the argument that there should be some other ingredients in there, but as it happens, in modern-day Greece, Yttria still exist. They've just changed the name, and while sometimes they're made with different dried fruits and nuts and other flavorings, most of them are still just two ingredients, honey and sesame seeds, just as Athenaeus described almost 2 millennia ago. So the ingredients that we're going to need today are a half pound or 225 grams of sesame seeds and a half pound or 225 grams unfiltered honey. Super simple and rather easy to make. Almost as easy as making a bowl of ramen from today's sponsor, Vite. Vite's motto is fast fuel, peak health, easy nudes. That's noodles, by the way, because they are very easy to make and they are packed with nutrients. And getting all of your nutrients in isn't just about physical health, but also mental health, a topic near and dear to the heart of Tim, the CEO of Vite. And being a small company, he's able to make the call that all of his employees can take mental health days that are paid whenever they need. I know it has nothing really to do with noodles per se, but I just love being able to support a company that is able to do things like that. And I'm actually really excited because the Massaman curry noodles are coming back very soon. A couple months ago, I made Massaman curry from scratch here on the channel, and delicious, but not something I'd be able to do every day because it takes all day. But the Massaman curry noodles from Vite only take 5 minutes. So to try Vite Ramen for yourself, go to viteramen.com/tastinghistory and enter code TASTINGHISTORY10 to get an extra 10% off of your order at checkout. Link is in the description. Now, when it comes to the Yttrion, it's really easy to make. The first thing to do is to toast your sesame seeds. This is really where most of the flavor is going to come from. So heat a dry pan over medium heat and then add in your sesame seeds, and it should take about 5 minutes to get these nicely toasted. But you want to keep them moving around because if you let them sit, they may burn, and that is not a flavor that you want. They'll get kind of bitter and frankly nasty. Now they will start to brown just a little bit as they cook, but really what you're looking for, or rather smelling for, is the aroma. This wonderful nutty aroma coming off of the seeds. That's how you know that they are done. And once they're toasted, take them off the heat, but keep them warm because they do still need to be quite warm when we finally add them to the honey. As for the honey, you can use any honey, but raw, unfiltered honey is going to, 1, be best for the flavor, and 2, will be the best for the texture that we are looking for. Anacreon mentions it like this: "And I breakfasted on a bit of crisp Yttrion, breaking it off, and drank a jar of wine." So to get that Yttrion nice and crisp, as Anacreon says, it's not only important to use the right type of honey, but the right amount, and to caramelize the honey before adding in the sesame seeds. So add the honey to a saucepan over medium heat and let it melt. If any white foam forms at the top, just skim it off. Otherwise, stir the honey with a wooden spoon just so it doesn't burn. Then continue to heat it until it starts to boil, letting it heat until it registers 260 degrees Fahrenheit or 126 Celsius. And as soon as it hits that temperature, add in the sesame seeds, and the reason they still need to be warm is so it doesn't drop the temperature of the honey too quickly. Then stir in all of the seeds until completely combined, and then leave it over a low heat to cook for 3 to 4 minutes, stirring while it cooks. Then pour the mixture into a lined baking tin. I'm using a 9x9 square pan, but you can also use a larger pan for a thinner Yttrion. The most important thing is to make sure that it is lined with parchment or foil, or you will never get it out. It is super, super sticky. Now, you can actually cut it in just a couple minutes, but if you let it cool all the way before cutting it, you're gonna get a nice crisp edge on it, and that's what I'm going for. It just looks better, and also it gives me time to tell you a little bit more about what a Greek hoplite might have eaten. Today, if you get called up to serve in the military, you're going to be outfitted with a uniform, weapons, and hopefully some food. But in ancient Greece, the shopping was up to you. Now, there are times and places in ancient Greece where there were professional standing armies, like the entire free population of Sparta, or the small but mighty sacred band of Thebes, who I need to do an entire video on because they are freaking fascinating. But for today's purposes, most armies at the time in Greece were made up of citizen soldiers, or hoplites. An army made up of farmers, merchants, and other people who would be NPCs in a video game. But that doesn't mean that they weren't extremely skilled warriors. In Athens, for instance, every male had to go through 2 years of training before they hit 20. During that time, they would learn how to fight specifically in a phalanx, a formation of heavily armed infantry in close rank and file. And these 2 years of service would prepare them should they ever be called up to defend the city, because if Athens went to war, they could be called up all the way to the age of 60. But since they were, for the most part, just regular old citizens, it was up to them to bring all of their equipment. And that's actually where the term hoplite comes from. Hopla meant to equip or equipment. Later, the term hoplon also came to refer to the iconic meter-wide round shield carried by the hoplite, a shield that they had to bring from home. They also had to supply their own spear, called a dori, and the siphos, or short sword, which typically came out only when the phalanx broke formation. They were also responsible for their own armor, like greaves, which would protect the shins, and the iconic helmet. Though there were various styles of helmet, depending on time and location, the Corinthian style became the most recognized. And both the weapons and the armor would vary from soldier to soldier depending on their social status and how much money they made, kind of what they could afford. Perhaps the piece of equipment that varied most was the cuirass, or body armor. Some men could afford molded bronze to cover their chest and back to shield themselves from any manner of projectile or blade, while others wore leather, and yet others linen. Now I know what you're thinking, linen body armor seems not great, but it turns out that the linothorax, as it's called, was rather effective at providing protection against bronze-tipped arrows and the slashing of a sword. See, while it was made of linen, it's not like a linen suit that you'd expect a Tennessee Williams character to wear, but rather many, many layers of linen tightly woven and then glued together. They were so effective and allowed for easy movement that even Alexander the Great was often portrayed as wearing one. So whether you go bronze or linen, you are now equipped, and so you can focus on the food, because most of what you're going to be eating, you need to bring yourself. In his play The Acharnians, Aristophanes describes the shopping spree following the Athenian hoplite call to arms during the Peloponnesian War against Sparta. The soldiers were to arrive at camp with no less than 3 days of provisions. The city fills with the clamoring of soldiers, crowds surging through the market colonnades, laden with wheat being measured out, wineskins, oar leathers, garlic, olives, onions in nets, anchovies. Other foods that were common to bring in those first few days were grains like emmer and einkorn and barley, as well as dried chickpeas and lentils, 1, because they were cheap, 2, because they traveled well, and 3, because they were pretty easy to make. Now, when it came to meat, you had fewer options. There was dried meat, and then there was something called opson, which was a popular relish made of dried fish that would be spread onto bread. But any meat that was like fresh that you wanted to cook, you should probably leave that at home. 1, it doesn't travel very well, and 2, you probably didn't have a good way to prepare it. At least you couldn't boil it, which was the most common and preferred method at the time. In Plato's Republic, he talks about provisioning an army during the time of Homer. Homer, you know, feeds his heroes at their banquets on campaign on soldiers' rations. They do not feast on fish, even when they are on the shores of the Hellespont, and they eat no boiled meat, but only roasted, which is most convenient for soldiers, requiring only that they should light a fire, and not have to go to the trouble of carrying pots and pans. He also says that Homer never mentions any sweet sauces or sweet relishes because those weren't foods that would keep an army fit and healthy, which makes me wonder what Homer would think about Itrion, but I don't want to think about it too much because I've already made it. Now, who definitely wouldn't approve of the sweet snack would be the Spartans, who were famous for their Spartan eating habits and dishes like melos zomos, or the black broth of Sparta, which I did an entire episode on. The Spartans also figured out a way to drink water on the march that was, let's say, less than desirable. They didn't boil it, which would have been smart, but would take time. Rather, they just kind of hid it in a certain kind of cup. The Laconian koton was especially well thought of by the soldiers, as Critias says, for its color hid the disagreeable appearance of the water which they were often forced to drink, and its curving lips caught the muddy sediment and kept it inside, so that only the cleaner part reached the drinker's mouth. A surefire way to get dysentery, which is why most hoplites preferred to drink wine. But wine was heavy and cumbersome, and you could only carry a little bit at a time. And while most hoplites did have a slave with them to do all the heavy lifting, after a few days, you're still going to be out of rations. So what do you do then? Well, if you were fortunate, you'd have a leader like Koirataris of Thebes to replenish your stores. When he arrived outside of the city of Byzantium to take control of the Greek army there, he did so with animals for offerings and a soothsayer. Behind them, a string of 20 bearers carrying barley flour, 20 carrying wine, 3 laden with olives, 1 with as much garlic as a single man could carry, and another with just as many onions. These supplies were set down for distribution to the men. It was the employee pizza party of 5th century BC Greece. Now, if your leader was not willing or able to bring you food, then unfortunately you'd probably have to rely on the kindness of strangers. Herodotus wrote about heralds being sent out ahead of the army to cities and towns to let them know that an army was coming and they better get ready to feed them. They should gather up all the grain and grind it into flour. Moreover, they fattened up the finest cattle that money could buy, and they maintained poultry and waterfowl in cages and in ponds for entertaining the army. Now there he's actually talking about the Persian army under Xerxes, but the same went for the Greek armies. As long as A, they were on your side, and B, they couldn't just stop you from entering the city altogether, which is exactly what several Italian cities did when the Greek armies arrived in 415 BC. Some of the cities would not receive them with a market nor allow them into town, although offering them water and a place to anchor their ships. Tarentum and Locri did not even supply them with the latter. But when towns were happy to see you, well then it was time to eat. When the Greek military leader Xenophon arrived at an Armenian village with his troops, there was no place where they did not serve on the same table lamb, kid, pork, veal, and poultry, along with many loaves of bread, some of wheat and some of barley. But that was definitely not the norm. Most of the time, when a Greek army showed up, they just had to kind of take what they needed. The Greeks, in plundering the strongholds, found supplies in the houses, of bread in heaps. They also found slices of dolphin salted and stored in jars, and on the upper floors of the houses were large amounts of flat nuts. By boiling and baking these nuts into loaves, they made the bread which they most used. The Greeks also found wine, which, by reason of its harshness, appeared to be sharp when drunk unmixed, but when mixed with water, was fragrant and delicious. And while it may sound nice, this pillaging, or living off the land, as many armies throughout history have called it, it was actually a rather time-consuming process. And Thucydides says that the reason that the Greek army was unable to defeat Troy very quickly and had to instead besiege it for 10 years during the Trojan War was because they kept having to leave to go pillage more food. But if the Greeks had gone all together with a plentiful supply of food and waged war continuously without relying on farming and foraging, they would have easily won in battle and captured the city. So just like any good Greek tragedy, this one has a moral. When going to war, always pack a snack. Like Yttrion. So once the Yttrion has completely cooled, remove it from the pan. Easier said than done when you forget to line the sides of the pan, as I did. You definitely want to line the whole thing with parchment because it's just super sticky. Luckily, I was able to kind of break the seal around, and finally I got it loose. And then you can cut it up however you like, and it's ready to eat. And here we are, the sesame and honey Yttrion of ancient Greece. It smells really good. That kind of wonderfully warm, delicious, toasted sesame smell. I mean, because basically that's what it is. I also just love the top. It's so like smoothly sesame. You kind of have to make it smooth before it hardens to get it to do that. Anyway, I'm gonna try it. Here we go. crispy as it's supposed to be. I mean, what's not to like? It's super sesame at first, but as the honey kind of melts, that's the flavor that takes over. But that's why you want that unrefined honey. The flavor is not as sweet. It's still sweet because it's honey, but it's not quite as sweet as clarified honey. And it's cool because at first it's like really crispy, but then it melts and it becomes soft and almost like marshmallow, but a little grittier. Yeah, it definitely gets stuck in your teeth, but it's really, really good, and I'm sure it just packs a real burst of energy. I'm going to be bouncing off the walls for the next couple hours. Luckily, I'm filming fairly early in the day so I can sleep. But I do love that this is actually not just Greek. They have this in many, many places around the world. They still make these in South America and Mexico. Heck, I think you can get something very similar at like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. It's just so simple and not that hard to make. There are recipes that you'll see that just basically add both together and then cook it or bake it. It doesn't work. At least it's not going to get as crispy. I mean, it's still edible, but it's not as crispy. So cook the two things separately and then bring them together at the end, and you'll get something delicious and ancient Greek. So go ahead and make this. There's no reason not to. You have no excuse. It's super, super easy. It's only 2 ingredients, and it's been a couple weeks since I mentioned the Tasting History Cookbook behind me, so if you haven't got your copy, you can still go get your copy today. And yeah, I will see you next time on Tasting History.